What are some ways that children and parents can support their children to feel calm and centered, at peace, when there's just all these different things that can contribute to emotional overwhelm?
Gosh, if you're not a highly sensitive parent or a empathic parent or intuitive parent and you have those children, it's really hard because you don't understand
Yeah.
what, or can't relate. It's not that you don't understand, but you can't relate to all of these emotions that are bubbling inside of them. And intuitive children, just in case there are any of them listening out here that parents who are not highly sensitive or empathic or intuitive, children who are intuitive and empathic, so they feel other people's feelings, right? They not only feel their own feelings, what's going on inside them, but they feel other people's feelings. But that's just one layer of it. Aside from also feeling someone else's feelings, they are also feeling the feeling underneath that person's feeling. So let me explain. You might get this, but also I'll
Breaking this stuff down. Yeah, keep going.
like what feeling underneath their feeling? So
That's overwhelming. Oh, yes, it is.
yes, it is already. And I'm just talking about it.
Right.
We haven't even felt those feelings yet. So let's say you and your child are walking down the street and your child is empathic and you guys see a man yelling at a woman, right? Angry and yelling and enraged. And the child, the empathic child, is going to already, whatever they're already experiencing and their feelings from the day, they're going to bring that into the experience. They're going to see this man, they're going to feel the man's anger, right? As if it's rising up from within them too. They feel it rising up. It's not like they're just watching a man being angry and yelling. They are feeling it, like their chest might be getting tight. Their breath might be getting, more shallow. They might be feeling some heaviness in their stomach, however it is that the child feels it, but they are feeling that person's anger.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the first level, right? They're feeling the person's anger. Underneath this man's anger, because there are always layers to emotions, he may have just found out that his wife cheated on him, let's just say, right? I'm just making it up. And he's feeling helpless and he's feeling the fear of losing his wife, right? So the child not only feels the anger that's physically being and visually being expressed, but the child is also feeling that man's sense of helplessness, his fear, his sense of loss. And if he has issues that he was dealing with his dad cheating on his mom or his mom cheating on his dad, then he's got all these abandonment issues that go way back. Yeah. So the child is feeling all of those layers, right? The empathic, sensitive child. And I think a lot of children in general do feel that anyway, because we are all born with this intuitive sense. But for an empathic child, it just may be like a double whammy, right? So they're feeling all of those layers of that man's anger, and they're taking it in, and it just might be so overwhelming, because it's overwhelming just for me talking about that and all the issues that may bring up for the man when all you see out there is anger, right? So as a person who's not highly sensitive and maybe not taking in that person's anger, you just see an angry man. No big deal, let's move on. For the child who's empathic, oh my gosh, all of those feelings are going in them and they don't know how to process it. They don't even know what's happening. They don't even know they're taking it from him. Suddenly they feel the sense of abandonment because the man is feeling the sense of abandonment from his childhood and his unresolved issue. So there's there's like a double whammy for the empathic child. And then also you have, people who are in this world smiling and laughing and everything's so wonderful, but inside, on the outside, you might see like the class clown, right? But on the inside, there's depression underneath, there's going on underneath, there's a lot of shame, there might be hurt from a broken family, whatever's going on with that child. But on the outside, everybody sees this happy-go-lucky child smiling all the time and laughing all the time. And on the inside, your empathic child feels underneath that. So that's really confusing for a child who sees somebody smiling and laughing and everybody's like, oh, that kid's so happy. And yet they're feeling this sense of like sadness and depression coming from that child. Like it's so overwhelming and so confusing. So as a parent, yes.
All of it. And it's, thank you for really simplifying what that experience looks like from beginning to end and how different it is for someone who isn't highly sensitive or may not tap into those feelings just naturally because it's something that happens in a split second. It's just, and but they take it with them, and then they start thinking about it and um, putting it into their mental thinking, their thoughts, like, I wonder what's going on, I wonder what they can do, and I feel so bad for that person, and I wonder what's going to happen when he gets like, all these things start coming up, like thoughts, feelings, and like you said, it's not just the initial thing that they're seeing with their eyes, it's all the different layers beneath that, and it is overwhelming. I mean, as we speak about it, it's like, what? All this stuff, like, that these children are taking in, and that's why it's important, like even at home, when there are disagreements or there are things going on, it's not always helpful to put on a smiley happy face if there's something else going on. And of course we can make it child friendly, but we can still be honest about things that are happening so it's not confusing, because children need to be able to trust what they're seeing and what they're getting. And I hear that gift in there too, of being able to really understand people and know what's going on underneath the surface. And that truly is a gift once they can learn how to not make it a fight or flight experience every time. you know because it could be so. How can parents kind of help their children in those moments where they might see something that they think like, oh, I see that my child is upset after seeing that interaction. What do I do to help them instead of not, I don't want to escalate it. So, what's a way that they can kind of calm it down?
Yeah, so depending on the age of the child, like if your child is still believing in Santa Claus and tooth fairies and magic and that kind of thing, that
Yeah.
if they're still believing in that or even close, and I think this may even work for teenagers depending on how open they are to receiving it.
Uh-huh.
But what I like to do, like physical things, right? Because our emotions are so, you can't put your finger on it, right? It's intangible. It's not like this pen where I'm like, here's a pen, here's a red pen. It's emotions that go through, and sometimes you can't even explain them. So I like to put it in physical form, into like a concrete, practical form. So one of the things that I teach my clients who have taught their kids, but I've taught them to the clients and they use it and they love it, but they've taught it to their kids too. It was really something that I just did for my adult people, right?
Oh, yes, it's
And they're like,
so
oh, I tried this with
translatable.
my kid. Yeah. So if you have, let's say, your kitchen sponge where you wash dishes, right? Take your sponge. If you're into art, you might have like one of those art sponges that are natural from the sea. But just take
Okay.
a sponge. Explain. Your children know what sponges are, right? But explain it
Yeah.
to them. Look, here's a dry sponge. Here's water. You put the sponge on the water, and the sponge is going to absorb the water. So now the sponge contains the water. In the same way, you child, your body and your energy field, you're sort of like a sponge for emotions. You don't absorb water, but you absorb emotions and energy, right? So, in the same way that the sponge absorbs water, you absorb energy. So, we're going to try, because it's so overwhelming, with the world has so much energy around us. Everybody has their own stuff and emotions and everything. So, we're going to use the help of this physical sponge, right? And you can take your child to an art store when stores open up. You can take them, or
Or
go to Amazon,
Amazon or
whatever.
wherever.
Right. Let them pick out their special sponge and make it a special sponge, right? It could just
Mhm.
be a kitchen sponge, but make it a special thing where they order a little art sponge, and those little ocean ones look really adorable. And they can cut a small piece, put it in their pocket. And so when you're going out into the world, or even at home, when you're like in the space where you don't want to take on anyone else, if there's other children around or parents or uncles or aunts, you don't want to take on anyone else's emotions, just sort of have that sponge with you, put it in your pocket. If backpacks or whatever, you just carry that little sponge, and whenever you start to feel something that you don't know what it is, because it doesn't all start as overwhelm. It starts and then it builds up to the point of overwhelm, but we don't always catch it, right? But if you start to feel something, anxiety or stress or concern, take that sponge out of your pocket and just like say, hey, this is your job. You absorb the emotion. I'm going to just be me right now. And so then
I love that.
in the kids' way, they believe it. And then they allow the sponge to absorb the emotion. And then you can put the sponge over on the other table and say, look, I'll pick you up later. You have so much emotion right now. I don't want to deal with you. I'm going to put you over there.
I love
Right?
it.
Or you're full. Let me grab another piece of the
Oh
sponge,
my
right?
goodness.
So
Do
you
they
can just
draw
make,
faces on them too?
you can do that. That would be great.
I can see my kids doing that.
Yeah,
I
so
love
just make it
that.
more of a fun game for them, and they're really susceptible to suggestion. They're open to that.
Totally.
And it makes it fun and exciting, and it's not so heavy and dense. Oh, I can't take on emotions. It doesn't have to be that way. There's another thing. Once they actually have absorbed, like if they are to the point of overwhelm, you've already showed them about the sponge. You can actually, for the parent, have a big sponge. Buy a big sponge for yourself, and if your child is overwhelmed, bring it to your child and say, "Hey, we forgot, your little sponge couldn't take on all of that. So here's a big one." And, they can just put all their energy in there. They'll still feel something because of course it's a sponge and it doesn't absorb emotions, but it helps them to like get most of it, take that edge off and get most of it out. And it gives them something else to focus on.
What I love about that is that you're making the clear distinction that those emotions are not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really powerful realization because it can be hard to distinguish, what's theirs, what isn't. But when they have something tangible that they're actually directing that emotional energy toward, then they realize that it's not even mine. And I love how you spoke to the sponge. Because it's really effective in, giving it a job to do and relinquishing the child from that role of processing those emotions, of taking those emotions on. And it's fun. It's tactile, which I think is perfect for children. They need those kinesthetic cues, I think, can be really helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's a great one. And I know parents are going to be like, okay, I got to get my sponges. I mean, get one for yourself, not just your child, because that's a good one.
Yeah. You could also, can I give you one more?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, the
You could
more.
also, what I like to do is, like you were talking about earlier, like get that emotion out of you so that they're not identifying with the emotion, right? So they're not saying this emotion is who I am, right? So sticky notes, everybody, and kids understand this because they know Facebook and you put a sticky post and it doesn't move, right? So sticky notes, you have sticky notes, and if your child is already overwhelmed, right, you can have them just with a Sharpie or the pen, just write everything that they're feeling. So one thing might be sadness, and then the next thing might be anger, right? And then write down everything that they're feeling, everything that's going on. And if they don't even have a word for it, they can put yucky, icky,
Mhm. Mhm.
bad, blah, or meh, or whatever, the words that kids use when they don't know how to describe what they're feeling. So once you've written them all down, it's, first of all, it helps them just to talk about it, right? So you're there helping them. So they're talking about that with you and they're expressing it and it's coming out of them. And then you can take this post-it and just like the sponge, stick it all the way in, the west wing of your house or whatever, or go out to your driveway and stick it on the car and say, I'm going to leave this sadness right there. And then you go back inside, right? You go take a walk down the street and leave that sticky note on a telephone pole or something like that. Where you just like,
Telephone pole can have that today. I'm giving you a job.
it's your job, telephone pole, you take it. So it just sort of gets it out of them. And it's
Yeah.
a fun little game so that they're not so absorbed in these feelings and thoughts that might be happening. It just sort of like helps them get outside of themselves, put those feelings out of themselves, have a place to put it, flush it down the toilet, burn it, whatever, rip it up, or just go down the street and put it somewhere else and say, not mine, see ya, and
Yep.
then come back home and it's better.
That's so helpful. I love those ideas. I mean, I'm sure parents are taking notes right now because these are so good. And they're so easy. I mean, who doesn't have Post-its somewhere in the house?
Right. Or you can write on rocks too. I've done that once with my niece. Like I write, we go outside and we just write sad on a rock and throw the rock away, or anger and throw that rock. You
Oh,
could
I
do that.
love that. Oh my gosh, my son would love that.
Don't throw it at somebody.
Right, just throw it
Don't throw
into
it at mom.
the yes. But that's so great because it's a valuable lesson and it's taught in such a simple way that's easy to understand. You don't have to go into this huge lesson about what it is, what it isn't, and all this kind of stuff. It just, I think kids intuitively know when you give them a tool like that, that, oh, okay. Because they already know when the emotion's coming in, it's like, oh no, here it is.